This message is from the Live the Life South Florida Student Life Team. Hey guys, my name is Sean. I'm excited to be with you today to talk through the steps of physical intimacy. This is my favorite lesson to teach through the Real Essentials curriculum. We're doing this again in partnership with Live the Life of South Florida. Let's get right into it. So this lesson, typically I'll have paper signs that I'll hand out to about 10 to 15 students. And these students will take these signs and they'll get in proper order. So the signs are all steps in a physically sexual relationship. So you've got hands holding, kissing, there's touching above the clothes, touching below the clothes, there's sex. And so it's all laid out. And so the students will get into any particular order. And I don't direct them. I get to just watch and enjoy and see the debate. Typically, this part is pretty straightforward. And so they get in order and they go, did we get it right? And the answer is, well, I'm not here to tell you what's right. I'm here to figure out what you think is right, because that's actually the biggest part of the lesson. And then they'll take these signs and hold them up proudly. And then I say, oh, hold on, you're not done. You've got 3 more signs to add. Then I'll add these 3 signs and send students into the line with these 3 signs. And those are commitment, marriage, and consent, in no particular order. And then the students go crazy. What do you mean? What is consent? And so consent is basically permission to move forward in a sexual relationship. Consent is something that it has laws behind it. I believe even in the state of California, the laws have gotten to such a place where if you are under the influence of a substance, let's say you went out for wine with your spouse even, and you got a little tipsy, who knows where that line is, and you guys have a sexual relationship together, it's possible, though not often enforced, that you have now been unable to give consent because you were intoxicated. So you can't give the other person consent to move forward sexually. And so in these circumstances, it's true that you could even violate your own spouse if they wanted to press charges just because there was some substance in your blood. Now, that's one state, and you might have to double check that, but I definitely have been told that by someone who I know that lives in California. So what is the point of that idea? Well, the whole idea is that there's something about sex that needs to be protected, or people need to be protected. And we feel that. And even groups that say, oh, people who put rules around when to be sexual, that's so ew and weird and religious and so conservative. And those same people often are the ones who also say, well, but we still need to legislate it. So it's funny because no matter what side you adhere to, you still feel that there's something about it that needs to be protected. And so whether you legislate it or you find principles that you choose to follow, or there may be religious principles, they're all still reasons that we go look at sexuality and go, it's just something that shouldn't be taken lightly. Okay, so these 3 cards, they're actually meant to show how we as a society have figured out to take good care of our physical intimacy. And so what do? Well, we put these into the mix, and now the students go crazy. They go, okay, so consent, is that before kissing? I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's all the way, maybe we don't even need consent. And so that happens. And then what about commitment? Well, what's commitment? And I don't tell them. You just kind of watch them shuffle. And so is it dating? Is it just a verbal like, hey, I'm into you, you're into me? Is it no, like we're serious, there's nobody else that we're going to be talking to at this time? And so they get into this order. And then marriage. And marriage is usually divided. There's some students who say, no, marriage is just paperwork, it's unnecessary, it's kind of put it at the end as if it's like just a reward after being together for a certain amount of time. And many people say, no, this is something that you put before a number of these sexual steps because it's part of showing commitment. And so that's always a fun debate. Now, typically, I'd say 8 out of 10 times, this is the layout I more or less get. And you'll see here that you basically got some commitment going on before things ramp up too much sexually. You've got consent going on before things ramp up, and then you've got marriage but before sex. Now, I was in a group with teen moms in one of my schools, and they said, all right, Mr. Sean, we just want to know, do you want what we wish it was, or do you want the way we've been doing it? And so these are teen moms, so you can use your imagination to go, yeah, well, okay, well, what is it that you wish for? Because you've already obviously gone through these steps. And so a lot of them would say, no, we do. We wish marriage was before some of these steps. And so that's the ideal. And the reason it matters to know your ideal is you're the one responsible for making sure that things play out the way that you want them to play out. You pick your partners based on how they feel about these steps. You pick your partners based on knowing that they'll respect where you put these red cards, these consent and commitment and marriage cards. So you're the one that mediates between what you wish for and what you're going to settle for. And so it's worth knowing. Now, the reason that I really like this experiment is because I get to watch people interact around these ideas. Now, here's where it gets crazy. All right. So I've had people rip my signs up. I've had people throw my signs in the trash when I ask this one question. Do you want to know what it is? All right. I'll tell you. I ask them, say, okay, assuming you have a little brother or sister that is in high school, what would you do with this order here if it was them? What would you do if it was your little brother or sister that's in high school and they wanted to have their steps of physical intimacy laid out? What would you lay out for them? And immediately, no sex. People put marriage in front of hand holding, which is like, what are you doing? You got to get married to hold hands. And so just people go crazy. And it's my favorite part of the experiment. And I then have to ask them, what are you guys doing? And they go, well, Mr. Sean, this is better. And it's like, well, what do you mean better? This isn't what you did for you. In fact, you were trying to get rid of the marriage and commitment and consent card for you. What is it you're trying to do for your little brother? Do you just not want him to have any fun? And they go, no, that's not what it is. Well, then tell me what's going on. Well, it's dangerous. Dangerous? You didn't tell me it was dangerous before. No, yeah. You could get hurt. You could get sick. Definitely these things are important, that there's a lot of commitment, a lot of marriage up front. And it goes on in this way. And I then ask them this question as a follow-up to the big question, which is, so why are you taking better care of your little brother or sister than you are of you? Why are you more willing to protect them than you are to protect yourself? A lot of times I'll get this ooh in the room, or this and this silence. And the reason for that is because it's true. Sometimes we protect other people better than we protect ourselves. I've often said, do you have any friendships that you wouldn't recommend to your little brother or sister, to your other friends? Because, well, they're not great friends, but, I keep them around because, well, I keep them around. And so think about that. Okay, now I get it. You may have a philosophy of life, a way of looking at sexuality, and you say, that's why I do intimacy the way I do it, because this is what I believe. This is how I think. I don't think there should be rules. I think it should feel organic and it should happen naturally. And that's all fine. But then if that was true, then when it applies to your little brother or sister, you should have that same idea, right? You would think. If that's your guiding principle for how you do sex, you would think that nothing changes when it's me, you, your friends, your little brother. So think about that. I think the reason things might change is because there is this deep idea that even psychologist and author Jordan Peterson, who wrote a book called The 12 Rules for Life, he's got 10 million views on some of his videos on YouTube. And I'm just going to mention that in his best-selling book, he's got a chapter, which I found interesting, that was about, it's I think the second chapter, it's called Take Care of Yourself Like You're Someone Worth Caring For. And he laid out all these ideas about why we don't take great care of ourselves. And it seems to me that at the center of it, and I think this is partly why I don't take care of myself the way I know I should, is there's shame, right? Only you and I know the ways we've failed, the things we haven't done that we said we would do, the lies we've told, the stories we hide under, the sort of the perception we put up for people, but it isn't really the real us. Like that's a deep idea. And what do you do with that? Do you just get rid of it? That's what the self-esteem movement tried to do and say, hey, okay, you've got failures, pretend those are not part of you. Okay. You don't need to think about that. You're amazing the way you are. But the problem is you and I both hopefully can hear that and go, but I'm not, right? I have things I need to change. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, we need to live in that weird tension of, okay, I have some failures, but I also have some hope. And so where do you live in that balance? There's this principle called the Stockdale principle. And so there's this gentleman who was left in a prisoner of war camp for a period of time. And he came out with this idea from his experience. He saw these soldiers, these fellow prisoners, let's say, and they basically got their hopes really high. They said, "Oh, I'm going to get out on this day, and we're going to be free by my birthday." And what happens is as the days approached and it looked less likely, they began to lose hope, and many of them would die. Read a book by Viktor Frankl. He was in a Nazi concentration camp, right? And he was basically housed there. And he said that he had a fellow inmate that basically said, "I'm getting out on this day." And about like the week of that day coming, he started to just feel not good. And then about a day before that day came, he got deathly ill because he started to realize no soldiers are here to rescue us. It's not looking very good. The very day that hit, he died. And so what happens in his heart? Well, you can assume if all that was going on was death by despair, which is clinically partly true. You really do need hope to live, and you can look into that yourself if you'd like. There's this dynamic that happens where you need to maintain some hope, but you also need to brutally face the facts. And so the Stockdale principle was basically this, that we are to have an unwavering hope and discipline to address the most brutal facts that we may face. And he learned that, and he teaches that, and that's been a principle that has existed and been spread through books in psychology since then. And this is an older concept than that. The New Testament has a concept in the apostle from the apostle Paul to the Romans, where it says, we can count all things as good because of this calling that we have according to the purposes of God. And so there's this idea that you can take even bad things and count them as good if you know that there's a purpose attached. And then they use the term God, and that could be for you like a higher purpose, a higher calling attached. And so there's this deep idea that you can take even bad for good if you know why it's going on and if you choose to learn from it. And so what we can do, looking at our shame, looking at our failures, looking at, okay, well, I may not be someone worth taking care of, but I need to be taken care of because, well, you have people you love and they would hope that you're taken care of, and you've got reasons to live. And so what do? Well, there's a worksheet that is included here in the notes. It's called Are You Enough? And you're going to want to fill this out. The reason is it's a really insightful psychological tool. And what you do with it is you write next to it when it asks you, are you thoughtful enough? Are you smart enough? Are you tall enough? Are you fit enough? Are you social enough? Are you spiritual enough? Are you popular enough? Are you strong enough? Get it? You have these questions. Now, what do you do with those questions? Well, you have to answer them honestly. And there is a way of looking at this that says, well, you know, the right person, the healthy person says yes to all of them. You know, they feel like they're always enough. But that's not necessarily true, because the person who thinks they're enough in every way doesn't have room to grow. Their cup is full. And so there's no space for more information, for more learning, for more experience. So you don't want to be the person that thinks you're always enough in every situation. But you also don't want to be the person that is so negative that you face despair and nihilism and hopelessness. And so what do? Well, you answer this honestly, and then you use this as a tool to say, what is going on inside of me? Because if I'm not somebody that I can take good care of, and if I'm just struck down with hopelessness and despair, I can't take things in life in stride. I can't maintain my composure through a battle. I can't handle criticism. And then that doesn't make me strong. That actually makes me weak. But if I think I'm amazing in all possible ways, I'm also not somebody that's teachable. And a person that can't learn is a person that can't grow. And a person that can't grow can't keep up with an ever-growing world. I think of a Disney movie, and I think of this movie because I have young children, but Moana is a great example of this. You've got Moana, who is this young princess who basically needs to go out on an adventure to save her country. And her constant challenge is to realize what she's worth. And so she has to even sing this song where she goes, I am Moana of Matanui, of this island. I am of this family. And so she has to draw back into this deep well of her value in order to move forward. And that was her whole journey, is to figure out how much of her mistakes define her or how much of her lineage defines her. And we live in that tension. And the other character in this movie is Maui, who he can't find any identity in himself because he doesn't have family. He doesn't have anything higher than him. He basically is this demigod that has quite a bit of power to him. And so he uses that as a means to get people's attention, to do good things for people so that they'll praise him and love him. We can do that too, trying to get attention and try to get people's affection and love. But we find that that's insufficient. And so he realizes that very quickly through the movie, that he doesn't have everything he needs to get the love that he wants. And so he comes from a position where he thinks he's plenty, but he's really insecure. And so right back to you and I, what are we going to do? Are we going to live in that tension, the Stockdale paradox, where we're partly aware of how bad things are and partly hopeful because things could go in the right direction if we recognize we have a calling, a purpose, a reason we're here? One of my favorite questions or ideas that I think about from time to time is something one person told me. He goes, Sean, there's two really important days in your life, the two most important days. And I didn't know the answer to this question or these 2 days. And it was, one is the day you were born. Seems reasonable. And the second is the day you figure out why you were born. So that's a question to ask yourself. Why am I here? What am I here for? Why was I born? And if you can answer that question with some confidence, or you're willing to explore that question, I think that's a door you could knock on and it would be answered. I think that is a prayer you could pray and you would find answered. I think that is a meditative thought you could dwell on and you will find a revelation. I think that's something worth knowing, because without that, then why would you do your intimacy any kind of way? You would just do what feels right at any moment or what other people expect of you. And that may be fine for you, but that might not be a recipe for safety and success, because that's not even what you want for your loved ones. And that's not what I want for my loved ones. And so we need to think this through. So the question I often get asked is, okay, good talk, but what's the right answer? What are the right steps to intimacy? And I don't give an answer to that because I don't know the answer for you. But I know if you take care of yourself like you're someone worth treating well, I think you'll come up with the right answer to this question. And I think you'll know where to put consent, commitment, and marriage, because you'll take care of yourself like somebody worth protecting. Thanks for letting me talk to you and to myself again at this deep level. I'm looking forward to the next talk. Bye, guys.